All right, guys. So what I want you guys doing today is go onto your week 2 agenda. Go ahead and go to Thursday. You are going to click the online textbook for notes if you are here. Go ahead and click it. Go ahead and open your book. And what I want you to do is go ahead and actually save this. So I notice I call it my chemistry book and I put it under a chemistry folder. And the reason I do that is when I go to click it, I'm always going to have the book here. Makes it easy to find. But we are in chapter 2, so we're going to go to chapter 2, measurements and problem solving. And right now we are going to be talking about significant figures, writing numbers to reflect precision. Okay, so yesterday we went ahead and talked about significant figures in equipment. Okay, and we went ahead and talked about the certain digits versus the uncertain digits. And if you're not understanding when an uncertain digit or an estimated digit comes into play, what I want you to do is go ahead and read these paragraphs. All right. And then if you need help and you want some extra examples, go ahead and look at examples 2.31. Look at A and B and tell me what you would measure that as, both certain and uncertain digits. And then come down to the bottom and under solutions, and I'm going to scroll up. So if you don't want to know the answers right now, pause this video. Okay. If not, the answers are right here. So it'll go ahead and tell you why it gave you this certain and uncertain digits they did. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and try exercise 2.31. And then if you need the answer, go ahead and click answer down here, and it'll help you estimate how to know your certain versus uncertain digits. So what we are going to be talking about today are significant figure rules. So sig-fig rules. Okay, there are 5 significant figure rules. And you guys can see, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's more so, can you figure out what rule's being applied by looking at a certain number? All right. So number 1 is all non-zero digits in a measurement are significant. Anytime you have any non-zero number, so a number that's not 0, it's always going to be significant. So if we look at 270 or 237, they're all non-zero numbers. Therefore, I have 1, 2, 3 significant figures. Looking at the next one, 1.897. Notice they're all, again, not zeros. Therefore, all of them are significant. I have 4 numbers. Therefore, I have 4 significant figures. That rule is usually the easiest to follow. So I don't think we need to go and hang out and try to figure out that one much longer. What I want you to go ahead and do is look at number 2. When we start having trouble is actually when we start talking about zeros. The zeros are what the rules that you have to figure out when they apply and when they don't. Okay, so rule number 2, zeros that appear between 2 non-zero digits, so they're in the middle, they are always significant. Okay, so if you look, you have 39,004. Well, we know we have 3 non-zero numbers. Therefore, I so far have 3 significant figures. But notice these zeros are trapped between 2 non-zero numbers. So any trapped zeros like these count. So I actually have 5 significant figures. So looking at 5.02, I have 2 non-zero numbers, but I also have a non-zero, or I also have a 0 that's trapped between 2 non-zero digits, which is a 5 and a 2. And so because that 0 is trapped, my significant figures are 3 because it's 5, 0, and 2. They're all significant. Rule number 3, zeros that appear in front of all non-zero digits are called leading zeros. Leading zeros are never significant. So if you look, I have 0.008. Well, a leading 0 is always going to be a number that's less than 1. And the number is always going to start with a 0 point. 0 point. So if you look, these are leading your first non-zero number, which is 8. So these 3 zeros do not count because it's before that first non-zero number. Okay? So the 8 is the only significant figure. Those leading zeros do not count. Looking at the next number, I only have 3 significant figures because those 4 leading zeros do not count. All right. The 4, the 1, and the 6 do count. Okay. So zeros that appear, we're going to go ahead and go to rule 4. Zeros that appear after all non-zero digits are called trailing zeros. So we have leading that come before, trailing obviously is going to come after. The number with trailing zeros that lack a decimal point may not be significant. Using scientific notation to indicate the appropriate number of significant figures. And we'll talk about significant figures or scientific notation tomorrow. But I want you to look, let's go ahead. I want you to ignore the times 10 to an exponent on every single one. We're just going to look at the numbers in front. So this first number, 1400. Well, it has 2 trailing zeros. So 1400 is going to be 2 significant figures. These trailing zeros don't count because there's no decimal. If there was a decimal right here, all of these would count, but there isn't. Okay, so let's go down to the bottom. I have 2 significant figures. Remember, rule number 1, all non-zero digits in a measurement are significant. 1.40, I have 3 significant figures here. Now, some of you are like, well, Mr. Sassby, that's a trailing zero. Well, this trailing zero counts because there is a decimal. So remember, if there's a decimal and there's a trailing zero, the trailing zero counts. Looking back at this first one, just to backtrack, because there are trailing zeros and there's no decimal in here, those trailing zeros do not count. The last number that you're going to look at right here, all of these are significant because, once again, 2 of them are non-zero numbers, 1 and 4. 0 and 0 are trailing, and they count because there's this decimal right here. All right? So you're going to have to remember trailing zeros count only if there's a decimal. So trailing zeros in a number with a decimal point are significant. This is true whether the 0 occurs before or after the decimal. So this is just This is just basically pointing up onto rule number 4. So it doesn't matter. So notice 620.0. Well, if you notice, there's 2 trailing zeros and they're split by a decimal. Doesn't matter. Because there's a decimal, both of these trailing zeros count. All right, so there's going to be 4 significant figures. And then this last number, 1900, or it's just 19.000. And it's 5 significant figures because this decimal is here. If there was no decimal, none of those zeros will count. So if we took this decimal out and it was 19,000, technically it would be 2 significant figures. All right. So what I want you to do is go ahead and write these next examples on a sheet of paper. Okay, so pause this video, go ahead and write these numbers. Now that you've gone ahead and unpaused the video, you should have had these written down. What I want you to do is go ahead and tell me how many significant figures each one of these has. Also, I want you to ask what rules above apply. All right, so looking at number or letter A, 5.87. Well, notice I don't have any zeros in here, so I don't think I'm going to have to follow any of the 0 rules, which are 2 through 5. So 5.87 is going to be 3 significant figures, and that follows rule 1. All non-zero digits in a measurement are significant. So your answer for A should be 3 significant figures. Moving to B, you have 0.031. Now, you have 2 non-zero numbers, so automatically I know I have 2 significant figures. The 3 and the 1 are significant. But the question is, are these leading zeros in front of it significant? Well, let's go ahead and look up to what it says about leading zeros. Okay? Zeros that appear a front in a non-zero digit are called leading zeros. They are never significant. So rule 2 states those zeros don't count. Therefore, I only have 2 significant figures for B, the 3 and the 1. Moving to C, 5.90. Well, I have 3 non-zero numbers, so automatically I know the 5, the 2, and the 9 are significant, but I have a trailing 0. Well, let's see what it says about trailing zeros. So looking at number 4, zeros will appear after all non-zero digits are called trailing zeros. A number with a trailing zero that lacks a decimal point may not be significant. Well, notice I have a decimal point. What that tells me is my trailing zeros count. Trailing zeros in a number with a decimal point are significant. So Rule 5 states, if there's a decimal here, that trailing zero counts. So C, I should have 4 significant figures. And then for D, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at these. So it's 3, 2, 4, and 4. So D, if you look, you have leading zeros and you also have trapped zeros. So right now I know that 2 and that 1 are significant, so I have 2. Let's go ahead and look at the leading zeros. Well, those leading zeros don't count because it says zeros that appear in front of a non-zero digit are called leading zeros, and they're never significant. Because they're in front of the number, they don't count. But these trapped zeros right here, those trapped zeros, zeros that appear trapped between 2 non-zero digits are always significant. So these zeros don't count here, but the trapped zeros do. So for D, I have 4 significant figures. Okay. So if we look at 5 or 500 for E, what does it say about trailing zeros? So I know that 5 is significant because it is a non-zero number, but those leading or those trailing zeros, do they count? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at E's answer. So, well, it says it's ambiguous, but we'll talk about this in my class. So what it's saying is, because there's no decimal here, these zeros do not count. So there's only 1 significant figure. Okay. And then we'll talk about counting numbers. That's a different rule, but because you can count, so if I say I have 12 chairs in a classroom, technically I have an infinite amount of significant figures, and we'll talk about that in another day. All right. So what I want you guys to go ahead and do is on your own, okay, exercise 3 or 2.32, okay, go ahead and tell me how many significant figures are in each of these. So you can go ahead and check your own answers on the website. All right. And what I want you to do is go ahead and look for today. So before this video, you should have checked your answers, and I will be posting a key online under the equipment or the classwork for week 2. So you should have watched this video. So you should be on B, watching the video. Go ahead now and work on your significant figures worksheet. It's in Google Classroom under week 2. This is due tomorrow at 3 p.m. So it's due Friday by 3 p.m. If you have not finished your Ed puzzle, it will be due today by 3 p.m. All right. So go ahead and finish those. Email me if you have any questions.